Chapter 13 of Lotus Buds. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Katie Grace. Lotus Buds by Amy Wilson CARMICHAEL. Chapter 13. Chapter 13. A Story of Comfort. Among the stories of comfort is one that belongs to our merry little Selah. She is bigger now than when the despairing photographer broke 13 plates in the vain attempt to catch her, but she is still most elusive and alluring, a veritable baby, though over 2 years old. Some months ago the Ayr measured her and told her she was 32 inches of mischief. For weeks afterwards, when asked her name, she always replied with gravity, 32 inches of mischief. All who have to do with babies know how different they can be in disposition and habits. There is the shop window baby, who shows all her innocent wares at once to everyone kind enough to look. She is a charming baby. And there is the little wild bird of the wood, who will answer your whistle politely if you know how to whistle her note, but she will not trust herself near you till she is sure of you. Selah is that sort of baby. We have watched her when she has been approached by some unfamiliar presence, and seen her summon all her baby dignity to keep her from breaking into tears of overwhelming shyness. Give her time to observe you from under long, drooping lashes. Give her time to make sure. Then the mischief will sparkle out, and something of the real child. But only something, never all, till you become a relation. With those who are only acquaintances, Selah, like Bela, has many reserves. Selah's joy is to be considered old and allowed to go to kindergarten. She takes her place with the bigger babies and tries to do all she sees them do. Sometimes a visitor looks in, and then Selah naturally will do nothing. But if the visitor is wise and takes no notice, she will presently be rewarded by seeing the eager little face light up again and the fat hands busily at work. Selah is not supposed to be learning very seriously, but she seems to know nearly as much as some of the older children, and her quaint attempts at English are much appreciated. Selah has her faults. She likes to have her own way, and once was observed to slap severely an offender almost twice her own size. But on the whole she is a peaceful little person, beloved by all the other babies, both senior and junior. Her great ambition is to follow Chellalu into all possible places of mischief. Anything Chellalu can do, Selah will attempt, and as she is more brave than steady on her little feet, she has many a narrow escape. Her latest escapade was to follow her reckless leader in an attempt to walk round the top of the back of a large armchair, the cane rim of which is a slippery slant, 2 inches wide. On the morning of her arrival, not liking to leave her for even a few minutes, I carried her to the early tea table when she saw the Ayr and smiled her first smile to him. From that day on she has been his loyal little friend. At first his various absences from home perplexed her. She would toddle off to his room and hunt everywhere for him, even under his desk and behind his wastepaper basket, and then she returned to the dining room with a puzzled little face. "Ayr is not. Where is he, Selah? Gone to heaven," was her invariable reply. When he returned from that distant sphere, she never displayed the least surprise. That is not our baby's way. She calmly accepted him as a returned possession, stood by his chair waiting for the invitation, climbed up as if he had never been away, and settled down to bliss. Part of this bliss consists in being supplied with morsels of toast and biscuit and occasional sips of tea. Sometimes there is that delicious luxury, a spoonful of the unmelted sugar at the bottom of the cup. For Selah is a baby after all, and does not profess to be like grown-up people who do not appreciate nice things to eat, being of course entirely superior to food. But excitable little damsel as she is in all other matters, her table manners are most correct, and she shows her appreciation of kind attentions in characteristic fashion. A smile so quick under the black lashes that only one on the lookout for it would see it. A sudden confiding little nestle closer to the giver, These are her only signs of pleasure, and if no notice is taken of her, she sits in silent patience. Sometimes, if politeness be mistaken for indifference, a shadow creeps into her eyes, a sort of pained surprise at the obtuseness of the great. But she rarely makes any remark, and never points or asks as the irrepressible Chellalu does in spite of all our admonitions. If, however, Seela is being attended to and fed at judicious intervals, and she knows the intention is to feed her comfortably, then her attitude is different. She feels a reminder will be acceptable, and as soon as she has disposed of a piece of biscuit, she quietly holds up an empty little hand and glances fearlessly up to the face that looks down with a smile upon her. This little silent, empty hand, held up so quietly, has often spoken to us of things unknown to our little girl. And as if to enforce the lesson, the other babies, to our amusement, apparently noticing the gratifying result of Seela's upturned hand, began to hold up their little hands with the same silent expectancy, till all round the table small hands were raised in perfect silence by hopeful infants of observant habits and strong faith. Mela, the rather stolid-looking little girl to the right of the photograph, is Seela's elder sister. She is not so square-faced as the photograph shows her, and she is much more interesting. This little one seems to us to have in some special sense the grace of God upon her, for her nursery life is so happy and blameless and unselfish that we rarely have to wish her different in anything. Her coming with little Seela's is one of the very gladdest of our overweights of joy. We heard of the little sisters through a mission schoolmaster, who, knowing that they had been left motherless, and that a Hindu of good position had obtained something equivalent to powers of guardianship, and thus empowered had placed them with a temple woman, was most anxious to save them, and wrote to us, and as he expressed it, also earnestly and importunately prayed the benign British government to intervene. The collector to whom the petition was sent was a friend of ours. He knew about the nursery work, and was ready to do all he could, but he did not want a disturbance with the caste and temple people, and so advised us to try to get the children privately. We sent our wisest woman worker, Panamuel, to the town, and she saw the principal people concerned, but they entirely refused to give up the children. The man who had adopted them had got his authority from the local Indian sub-magistrate, and contended that as the government had given them to him, no one had any right to take them from him. "And even if the government itself ordered me to give them up, I never will. I will never let them go." This, in Tamil, is even more explicit. "The hold by which I hold them, I will never let go." Panamuel returned, weary in mind and in body. After 3 days of traveling and effort, she had caught a glimpse of the baby, and the little face haunted her. The elder child was reported very miserable, and she had seen nothing of her. The guardian, of course, had not dealt with her direct, but she heard he had taken legal advice and was sure of his position. There was nothing hopeful to report. Once again we tried, but in vain. But this time a new bond had been formed, for the guardian had become attached to little Seela, and spent his time, so we heard, in playing with her. He let it be known that nothing would ever make him give her up. "She is in my hand, and my hand will never let go." Then suddenly news came that he was dead. The baby had sickened with cholera. He had nursed her and contracted the disease. In 2 days he had died. He had been compelled to let go. Then the feeling of all concerned changed completely. It hardly needed the collector's order, given with the utmost promptitude, to cause the temple woman to give the children up. To the Indian mind, quick to see the finger of God in such an event, the thing was self-evident. An unseen power was at work here. Who were they that they should withstand it? A telegram told us the children were safe, and next day we had them here. The baby was happy at once, but the elder little one, then a child of about 3½ was very sorrowful. She was so pitifully frightened, too, that at first we could do nothing with her, and there was a look in her eyes that alarmed us. It was so distraught and unchildlike. "My mother did her best for them," wrote the kind schoolmaster to whose house the children had been taken when the temple woman gave them up. "But the elder one has fever. She is always muttering to herself, and can neither stand nor sit." She could stand and sit now, only there was the muttering and the terrible look of bewilderment worse than pain. For days it was a question with us as to whether she would ever recover perfectly. That first night we had to give her bromide, and she woke very miserable. Next day she stood by the door, waiting for her mother, as it seemed, for under her breath she was constantly whispering, "Amma, Amma, mother, mother." She never cried aloud, only sobbed quietly every now and then. She would not let us touch her, but shrank away terrified if we tried to pet her. All through the third day she sat by the door. This was better than the weary standing, but pitiful enough. On the morning of the fourth day she sat down again for a long watch, but once, when her little hand went up to brush away a tear, we saw there was a toy in it, and that gave us hope. That night she went to bed with a doll, an empty tin, and a ball in her arms, and the next day she let us play with her in a quiet, reserved fashion. Next morning she woke up happy. The babies teach us much, and sometimes their unconscious lessons illuminate the deeper experiences of life. One such illumination is connected in my mind with the little trellised veranda shown in the photograph of the cottage used as a nursery when Mela and Seela came to us. It was the hour between lights, and 5 babies under 2 years old were waiting for their supper. Seela, Tara, and Evu, always a hungry baby. Ruhini, usually irrepressible, but now in very low spirits, and a tiny thing with a face like a pansy. All 5 thinking longingly of supper. These 5 had to wait till the fresh milk came in, as their food was special. That evening the cows had wandered home with more than their usual leisureliness from their pasture out in the jungle, and so the milk was late. The babies, who do not understand the weary ways of cows, disapproved of having to wait, and were fractious. To add to their depression, the boy whose duty it was to light the lamps and lanterns had been detained, and the trellised veranda was dark. So the 5 fretful babies made remarks to each other and threw their toys about in an exasperated fashion which tells you the limits of patience have passed, and the most distressed began to whimper. At this point a lantern was brought and set behind me, so that its light fell upon the discarded toys, miscellaneous but beloved, a china head long parted from its body, one whole new doll, a tin with little stones in it, a matchbox, and other sundries. If anything will comfort them, their toys will, I thought, as I directed their attention to the tin with its pleasant rattling pebbles, and the other scattered treasures on the map. But the babies looked disgusted. Toys were a mockery at that moment. Evu seized the china head and flung it as far as ever she could. Tara sat stolid with 2 fingers in her mouth. Seela turned away, evidently deeply hurt in her feelings, and the other 2 cried. Not one of them would find consolation in toys. Then the pansy-faced baby, Prosy, pointed out to the bushes, where something dangerous, she was quite sure, was moving, and she wailed a wail of such infectious misery that all the babies howled, and one rolled over near the lantern, which was on the floor behind me, and for safety's sake I moved it, and its light fell on my face. In a moment all 5 babies were tumbling over me with little exclamations of delight, and they nestled on my lap, caressing and content. Are there not evenings when our toys have no power to please or soothe? There is not any rest in them or any comfort. Then the one whom we love better than all his dearest gifts comes and moves the lantern for us, so that our toys are in the shadow, but his face is in the light. And he makes his face to shine upon us and gives us peace. For thou, O Lord my God, art above all things best. Thou alone most sufficient and most full. Thou alone most sweet and most comfortable. Thou alone most fair and most loving. Thou alone most noble and most glorious above all things, in whom all things are at once and perfectly good, and ever have been and shall be. And therefore whatever thou bestowest upon me beside thyself, or whatever thou revealest or promisest concerning thyself, so long as I do not see or fully enjoy thee, is too little, and fails to satisfy me. Because indeed my heart cannot truly rest, nor be entirely contented unless it rest in thee, and rise above all thy gifts and all things created. When shall I fully recollect myself in thee, that through the love of thee I may not feel myself, but thee alone, above all feeling and measure in a manner not known to all. End of chapter 13.